Hey there. On today's Moms Without Capes podcast, we have special guest Ilonka Ras. Ilonka is a certified mindset and transformation coach who helps busy mom entrepreneurs have more free time while creating mind-blowing results in their business. With an extensive background in both business and psychology, Ilonka has developed the unique ability to quickly identify the root cause of the challenges that her clients are facing and develop tailored strategies for success. Her passion for helping moms comes from her own personal experience as a homeschooling mom of three and working her own business. After years of living on the edge of burnout, spending countless hours behind her computer screen and not having much to show for it, Ilonka realized that sacrificing family for business was not how she wanted to play the game. On today's episode of the Moms Without Capes podcast, which I'm super excited about, Ilonka shares all about how our view of time contributes to any overwhelm we may be feeling, and more importantly, how we can begin to shift our perspective and feel more centered and calm. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Let's get into it. All right. Hey, Ilonka, welcome to the show. So let's just dive in and share with us about your journey and what got you to be where you are today.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It is always a pleasure to be on shows like this, especially when the audience is moms. So I'm a mom myself. I have three kids. They are aged 6, 8, and 11. And so I'm definitely in the trenches of like homeschooling and figuring out like that sort of transition into my eldest daughter going to teenager phase now. So there's definitely a lot happening. I'm also a coach, a business coach for mom entrepreneurs specifically. And yeah, I just sort of, got to this place doing what I'm doing now because I was really struggling with finding my thing, like the thing that I wanted to do and the thing that I felt passionate about. And so I was always in Facebook ads management, actually, coming from a corporate career, and just knew that this wasn't really something that I wanted to do. And I think the thing that sparked that for me was a two-week vacation where I was literally behind my computer for the entire 2 weeks and never set a foot on the beach, and just went home feeling like the worst mom and wife in the world. And so that sort of really showed me like something needs to change. And I went to a conference in Nashville, saw Tony Robbins, and had an incredible experience. And just, the rest is history. Started researching coaching and got into it, and absolutely love what I'm doing right now and working with women specifically, and the impact that, is created as a result of that.
How long ago was that you decided to jump?
So I went to the conference in 2019, but I actually only officially jumped towards the end of 2020. So although I was doing my Facebook ads business full time at that point, I sort of slowly, transitioned into coaching because I did have a bunch of clients that I didn't want to just, drop. So I was sort of waiting for their launches and retainers and things to finish so that I could actually, go with a clear conscience, so to speak. So yeah, took a while.
And Ilonka, where are you from? Because I noticed the accent.
So I'm from South Africa. I live in a tiny town called Mossel Bay, which is very close to Cape Town. And unuseful information, but I think we have like the highest population of great white sharks in this area. So guess who's not swimming in the ocean?
I thought South Africa was known for that, like the shark population.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we just went to Hawaii a few weeks or 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the things that kept coming up. I have 16-year-old twins, and we did surfing lessons, and that was our joke, like when we went out there watching out for the great whites. But I'm sure you have a lot more down there.
Yeah, definitely. We actually went on a trip with a helicopter, to see if we can see any sharks. Okay. And there are so many of them. It is
dang.
Yeah.
Scary. Do you know people that had like shark attacks?
Fortunately, we haven't had that many in this area, but not too far from here, it happens quite regularly. So
How
yeah,
scary.
definitely something that happens.
It's kind of scary. So,
Very.
all right, so let's jump into today's topic and talk about the overwhelm and how can moms be more intentional with their time when everything seems so important, in your
Yeah. So I
opinion?
think I think this is the most challenging thing, specifically because we're a mom. Like our time really isn't always our own. It's very easy, when you don't have kids and you're planning your day, and it's, you can say no to certain people, but sometimes your kids are of the age that you can't always say no to them. You don't always have the option of doing that, right? And so to me, overwhelm isn't necessarily the amount of things that you have, but rather the pressure and the thoughts, the meaning that we give the things that we don't do or don't spend enough time on. And so to me, overwhelm is very much an emotion that comes from the way we are thinking, the meaning we're giving to things. And when we can be more intentional with our time by really understanding what is really important to us, what really matters to us in this season of life that we're in currently, I think that relieves a lot of pressure, and also just taking some of the pressure off in terms of I should be doing this, or this is sort of the right way of doing this or that, and just finding what works for you in the season that you're currently in. If your kids are really young, like babies and toddlers, life looks a lot different than it does when they are teenagers, right? So
Agreed.
give yourself some grace when it comes to that.
Sure. So like when you're feeling pulled thin, it's more where it's feeling like stretched thin or pulled in a million different directions. It is more looking at your own thoughts that are behind that, because it's so true. Because so many, like two different moms can have the exact same schedule or the same commitments, but yet one feels completely drowning under those pressures or under the expectations that they're holding, versus the other one that seems to have it all together and seems to be like, hey, this is nothing, right? They could be spinning the same amount of plates or whatever. And it's really those beliefs or those thoughts that they're having about what they're committed to or about what they value, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a fine line between blaming everything on your thoughts and, going the route of like everything is mindset. Mindset is definitely 80% of the fight, right? But
Yeah.
there is the practical component as well. So if you really are just scheduled too thin, maybe it's time to actually look at your schedule as well, and let some of those things go that you might be trying to spend your time on, but there just really isn't enough time. I always think about my friends who also have young kids and they have so many extracurricular activities. They're literally driving from one thing to the next. And I was just like, why do you do this to yourself? It's like, it's amazing if your kids want to do things that are like sports and things like that. It's great. But in our house, we have a policy of like one activity per kid because it is impossible to get to everything, in a day. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then that feeds some beliefs of like feeling inadequate when you're so pulled thin that you can't even, spend time on, like you can't even hear your own thoughts because you're so worried about making sure everyone is where they need to be, and all of those shoulds, going back to like saying what you should be doing, really making that time to reflect on how are you defining your, what it is to be a good mom. And
Yeah,
really
exactly.
taking account or assessing how you're spending your time, because that says a lot. That says a
Yeah.
lot, sure.
Yeah.
So what are some simple ways, or how do you work with moms in helping them be more present and calm when we've got all of these responsibilities or all of these things calling out for us to take care of?
Yeah. So I think the first place to start is always to look at what it is that you are feeling in the moment, because that is very much a telltale sign of what is going on internally, right? So if you're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed or worried, there is a thought behind that, and to really just start questioning those thoughts. And I think this is something that we're not necessarily taught how to do. We just sort of, move through things and just push ourselves beyond the struggles. But I think it's really important for us to actually check in and take those emotions as little red flags and just give ourselves the opportunity to actually check in with where that is coming from. So I always tell my clients, stop and just check in with the emotion. And it's not about not feeling it. It's definitely not about being positive Polly 24/7, right? We're human beings and we're created to experience the emotions, and that includes the negative emotions, quote unquote, right? But to just really take a moment, feel the emotion and acknowledge that, hey, this is how I'm feeling in this moment. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not good or bad. This is just what it is. And then just questioning, what is it exactly that's making me feel this way? And you can always trace it down to a thought. You can always trace it down to a meaning that you're attaching to whatever the circumstance is in the moment. And so just taking that moment to check in with that can already be so helpful and make you feel so much better. But the other thing that I also always tell my clients is to actually just plan your time. Like, have a plan for your time and know what matters for you. It's very easy for us to get lost in the day-to-day activities like driving kids to soccer practice or whatever is happening during the day, and laundry. I mean, it just never stops. And so you can very easily feel like you're not necessarily spending the quality time with your kids that you want to, right? So just checking in with, what is it that you want to create? Like, what is it that is important to you? If it is connection with your kids, then a simple trip to soccer practice can also give you that. You can definitely switch off the radio and just take some time to check in with your children, for example. So always having a plan for your time, because if you're not going to plan it, someone else will, but also giving yourself some grace and allowing some buffer time in there so that life can actually happen and you're not going to be fritzed out because you scheduled yourself, within an inch of your life. So, yeah.
Ilonka, we have so much in common. Like what you have just shared is so like spot on. My background is cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So it's basically cognitive model, which is exactly what you are referring to, the emotions being based on those thoughts. And moms they tend to be so busy that doing all the things that you're talking about, like driving your kids to soccer practice, like 50 million extracurricular activities, that they don't make the time in order to stop and just ask themselves, like, to check in with themselves. And it's so important to be able to see, like, what is fueling those feelings that you're having. And just like you mentioned about being able to not change the emotion, but rather be able to sit with the uncomfortable emotion and acknowledge it and really dig into that and say, where is that coming from? And start digging at like the thoughts, the automatic thoughts that are fueling it, the beliefs and then start shifting those beliefs with your words, really, like the way you're saying, the way you're talking to yourself, giving yourself grace and that compassion, and really just making time for yourself through those check-ins is a great way to start with, feeling more present and calm and in the moment. Because how often do us, like as moms, we're always thinking, like always like preparing, and like always our attention is so divided that in order to collect ourselves and to feel like that sense of relief and like being able to breathe, we need to be able to do those check-ins and be okay with doing it, and like make it part of part of our routine.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that, something that you just mentioned that's really important is to check in with how you're talking to yourself, because that definitely is contributing to how you're feeling. If you're constantly telling yourself, I'm so overwhelmed, and that is your mantra, that becomes your life at the end of the day. Right. So just really checking in with it. And I always say, things like, I'm so busy, I'm so overwhelmed, like, there's so many things that we just on autopilot tell ourselves every day. And, it's time to check in with that and just really question whether that's actually true.
Yeah, true. Right. Becoming aware of what it is that you're saying to yourself is definitely key. So what is time really, and how can moms manage it for more connection with their family? You mentioned like taking them to soccer practice, and if you value time with your kids, you can use that time as a way to connect. Can you give us other ideas or other ways that we can manage our time better?
Yeah. So I think
planning it.
Yeah. So I think it isn't possible for us to actually manage our time. And I think we've been sold this, I don't want to say it's a lie, but we've been sold this illusion of like, that we can have balance, like we can do it all. And we certainly can do it all, but we can't do it all at once, right? And so I think there's certain foundational beliefs that, have been sort of programmed into us, by whoever and whatever. And now we've sort of taken that as fact. But to me, time is obviously the hours and the minutes on the clock, right? But it's more than that. It's also the emotion that we feel in those hours and minutes. And so I always say, if you think about what is a short time, what is a long time, there's definitely instances where 10 minutes felt like 10 hours, right? Or 10 hours felt like it went by so quickly, like you don't even know how that happened. And so what's the difference between those two scenarios? It's definitely how you felt emotionally, how you connected with that moment. And so managing your time is really about managing your emotional state. And if you are calm and you are present and in the moment, you're always dealing with life's challenges, way better with way more clarity than you are if you're overwhelmed and frustrated or irritated. And so to me, managing your time is really about managing that emotional state. And it really boils down to what you're saying to yourself, the meaning that you're giving to things, but also what you're actually doing with your physical body. Because I think it's so easy for us to get into our heads and always be thinking about, what I can be doing differently and what I should be thinking differently. And we sometimes overanalyze things a little bit, but just changing your physical body, like doing something different, getting up, going for a walk, jumping up and down, sometimes just smiling at yourself in the mirror, even though you look like a little bit of a psychopath for a minute or two. But eventually your body your mind catches up with that, right? And you actually start feeling better, because it's not possible for us to stay in the exact same emotional state continuously, right? We're going to shift out of it. And it's not really about going from frustrated to super happy necessarily in an instant, but just recognizing that it is a cycle and you're not going to stay there, and you have emotions that serve you and emotions that don't. And it's really about just questioning whether the emotion that you're feeling in this moment, is that really serving me towards the kind of mom that I want to be, the kind of woman that I want to be? Like, is it working for you? And if it's not, you have the power to change it. Like, you're not at the mercy of it,
Right. Like being able to recognize what it is that you can control and what you can manage. And sometimes It's not the situation itself, but it can be your response to the situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your perspective and all of that. So do you have any, if you undivided attention of our listeners, any kind of advice or anything that you want to add to this conversation that you think is super important for everyone to know?
Yeah, I think, just circling back to giving yourself some grace. It's like, I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to fit into, some picture that someone else created. And we really actually stop and ask whether that's something that we want for ourselves. I remember when I just got into the online space, the 7-figure business was always the sort of go-to, like you want that 2 Comma Club award, hanging at the back of the wall. And it's great if you have that, and that is your vision, and that's something that you want to create, right? But sometimes that's not what you want. And just really being honest with yourself in terms of what is it that you want to create? What kind of life do you want to live? And where are you right now in this season? Because maybe things might need to be a little bit different for where you are currently. And you have time, like you can do it, you can still do it a little bit later. It doesn't necessarily have to happen now. So just taking some of that pressure off, just getting really honest with yourself, and then just, making it happen, like doing the work that's required to get there.
Yes. Yep. Totally agree. So how do you, Ilonka, practice self-care?
Yeah, it's definitely not a bubble bath always, because I don't have a lot of time in the bath before someone actually comes and
bangs on the door.
Interrupts it, right? But something that I really enjoy doing is actually called the emotional freedom technique. So it's a tapping meditation. I've always loved meditating, but this tapping meditation, when I found it and I started doing it, I just felt complete relief, specifically for anxiety. And so it's a really easy, simple way to meditate, but still bring your body into the equation as well. And so you tap on various points, meridian points on the body. It's super easy, it's super simple, and it's so effective in terms of making you feel better because it just calms down your nervous system. And so that's a great way for me to connect with myself, but also, release some of that stress that we so easily carry with us.
Yeah, because you had mentioned about dropping into your body and really like interrupting that cycle with movement or with action. And EFT really helps with that connection and bringing your awareness into your body, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that what
Absolutely. And it also works with the limiting beliefs, the thoughts, the patterns that's going on mentally as well. And so that's what makes it, so effective for me. And I think, it's definitely something to give a try. So I actually downloaded the app called the Tapping Solution. It's a free app, and they have so many incredible tapping meditations there for all kinds of different, like even pain, stress, so many things. So definitely something I'll recommend for anyone who wants to check it out.
Okay. Speaking of recommendations, my next question is, do you have a book that you can recommend? And this is always one of my hardest questions to ask guests because we're usually readers. And so to choose one book is pretty hard to do. But
yeah, I was really torn between two books, but if I have to choose one, it will be 1,000 Names for Joy by Byron Katie. And I think, the reason why this book really stood out for me is the fact that we fight so hard with reality at times, and you're not going to win if you fight with reality, right? And so just the skill and the art that is associated with really letting go and really surrendering, and just again being aware of the ego and your thoughts and how that sort of interconnects with your life and how you feel and how you experience things. So yeah, amazing book.
It sounds like it. I wrote it down so I can add it to my list. We have a book club in Moms Without Capes.
Awesome. So yeah, definitely do that one.
And then finally, where can listeners find you? And I guess I forgot to ask you about, you had mentioned before we hit record about a gift that you would like to bestow upon the listeners, and then lead us right into where they can find you.
Yeah, so I have a free resource called an overwhelm toolkit. And it's basically the 4 biggest mistakes that we make that keep us stuck in overwhelm. And although this toolkit was written specifically for moms in business, it's definitely relevant regardless of whether you have a business or not. I think we all experience overwhelm to some degree. And so that definitely will be helpful in terms of just shifting some of the perspectives that you might have that's keeping you stuck in overwhelm. And then if people want to find me, they can just go to my website. It's just my name, ilonkaras.com. And I'm on Instagram and also on Facebook. I'm trying out TikTok. They can find me online, right? On most social platforms. I'm sure we'll link it down in the show notes.
Yes, definitely. Everything, all of Ilonka's information will be in the show notes of today's episode. So thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing with us your wisdom.
Thanks. It was so good being here. Thanks for having me.